With our reference in place, we can now start to model. Now, typically in Maya, we'll start with a primitive object and then reshape that to the reference, and then we'll start to use more and more tools to refine that shape. Now, for this model here, I want to model just half of it. Now, this model is symmetrical, so I'm just going to work on one side of it, and then we're going to mirror that over later to create the other side, and that way both sides will be identical. So the first thing I want to do is create a primitive. Now, when I create a primitive, I probably should be in an orthographic viewport. So I'm going to hit my spacebar, go out to my foreview, and then let's go into our front view. So I'm going to draw a box that represents the lower portion of this arm here. And so we're going to do create polygon primitives cube, and I want to make sure interactive creation is turned on. So when we do that, it gives me this little icon, and I can left click and drag to drag out the basic shape here. Now remember, we're only doing half, and then I'm going to drag forward to create some depth. Now with that in place, I actually need to center this a little bit. And as you can see on the side view, we didn't quite get enough height, but we can change that by changing the original creation parameters of the cube. So I'm going to go into my attribute editor, and then under Polycube 1, I'm going to work with my depth and bring it up to maybe around 10 or so, maybe a little bit less. And because I'm going to be modeling this, I don't need to get it perfect. I just want to get it close. And then I also need some additional detail here just so that I can start to model. So I'm going to give myself about 8 subdivisions here. And that should be enough to get me started. Now, when we start modeling against reference, we should probably turn on X-ray mode. Now, we can find that under Shading, X-ray. And when we turn that on, it allows us to see our geometry halfway transparent against the reference. Now, this will be very important in our front view. So I'm going to go into my front view, Shading, X-ray, and as you can see, we can now see our reference as well as the geometry. So I'm going to start modifying this geometry. I'm going to right-click above it, go into vertex mode, and let's start getting this shape in the right place here. So I'm going to select these top vertices here and move them down. And I'm really just going to start aligning the detail of this primitive to my chair here. So I need to basically do a little bit of a curve here. So I'm going to select some of these, maybe move them out, and maybe do some rotation. And I'm trying to just work my way through this. And this is really just a process of going back and forth, of getting some detail into the model and continuing to refine it. So really all we're doing is we're just matching the detail of our primitive to the detail of our model. And as you can see, it's really just, it's almost similar to tracing. So we're basically tracing these vertices over our model. And we can always add more detail if we need it, and we can work with other tools as well. So what I'm doing here basically is just starting to get some geometry in place. And now this does not have to be perfect. We're still going to continue to work on this. So as you can see, we're basically just modeling against reference. Now, we don't have to model strictly from one viewport. We could certainly go into another viewport here. I can turn off X-ray to get a sense for what this looks like. Or I can go into another viewport. So if I go into, say, my side viewport, you'll see that the back of the chair is a little bit angled. So I can right-click, go into vertex mode, marquee select those, and maybe rotate them to match, and maybe move them into place. So again, I'm just starting to match what I have in my reference to my geometry. Now we can continue to model what we have here, or we can use additional tools to add detail and refine this a little bit more. So when we model against reference, we can often use X-ray mode to see what we're doing. And the basic process is to just select the geometry and try and match it to the reference.